Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew,
And I'm Rachel.
and we are Picture the Scene podcast. We are a true crime podcast aimed to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. Each week, we delve into the murky world of lesser-known crimes from the UK and Ireland, and occasionally, we venture into renowned cases from around the globe. As with any true crime podcast, listener discretion is always advised, and today's episode is no exception. If you like what you hear, please do follow us on whatever social media platform you prefer, subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform of choice, and if you have the capability, give us a rating and review. It does really mean the world to us. And we got a lovely one from Germany, didn't we, recently,
It
Rachel?
was sparkling, wasn't it? Our
It,
review from Germany.
it was sparkling, yes. It really did cheer me up on that day. I think I was having a bit of a crappy day, so it was
Oh,
good to read it. So thank you, everyone. And please do keep sending them in. And if you like us that much that you want to support us, you can do so for less than the price of a cup of tea or coffee on Patreon, with our lowest tier starting at £1 per month. We release bonus content every month. The links to our social medias and Patreon can be found in the show notes, or visit patreon.com/scenepod, that's patreon.com/SCELEPOD. And we do, where possible, now release our episodes a week early for our Patreon supporters. So you don't have to find a lamp and rub it and use one of your free wishes to time travel. All you need to do is subscribe to us on Patreon. So, Rachel, I can take a breath now. I've done the intro. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I am sparkling. Thank you very much.
Yay!
Yeah,
Whoop, whoop.
indeed.
We like it when you're sparkling because it means you're in a good mood.
Yes, indeed.
And listeners, it sometimes it's quite hard to be in such a good mood so early on a Friday morning.
Yes, although I have the day off today, Rachel.
Oh, that's why you're in a good mood.
Yes, my out of office is on, and that's my most favourite thing in the world, turning my automatic replies on, and I am not working today. But back at work Monday, but I've had most of this week off, so it's good.
There you
So the
go.
question is, Rachel, are you ready for some true crime?
I was born ready, Andrew.
That's what your mum tells me. Right, so let's get to this then. And if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you to relax. Close your eyes and picture the scene. Today, I'd like to take us back to March the 30th, 2014, and we're visiting the town of Eastleigh in Hampshire. Eastleigh is a town in the southeast of England, not far from Southampton, and it has a population of around 24,000 people. It has been around in one form or another since the Saxons around 1300 years ago. Now, I'm not going to dwell on Eastleigh much, because from what I could tell, it's not really known for much. Its most famous person born there, and I seem to think you really like this person, Rachel. I have no idea. Most famous person seems to be Scott Mills, the radio DJ.
I don't mind Scott Mills. And that really segues me nicely into something I forgot to celebrate earlier. This week I got Taylor Swift tickets. And Scott Mills is a massive fan of our Tay Tay, isn't he?
I have no idea, but congratulations on the Taylor Swift tickets. You could sell them and pay your mortgage off.
Not a chance. These things are, oh, it's the best thing about 2024 so far, apart from our newborn baby.
Well, technically, that's 2023, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. But
Old news by then.
she'll still be a newborn in early 2024.
Yes, I know. I'm
I'm
only joking.
sorry in advance to my future newborn.
It was on this day, so on the 30th of March 2014, so roughly 10 years before you're going to see Taylor Swift. It was around 4:30 in the morning. There was a brisk easterly wind blowing at around 10 miles per hour. It was dry. It was still dark. There was a few scattered clouds. And even though it's 6 degrees Celsius, which is around 42 degrees Fahrenheit, that easterly wind would have made it feel a lot colder. Now, not many people would be up and outside, would they, Rachel, at this time in the morning on a cold day, but some brave souls had ventured outside of their warm beds. One of these souls that was no longer in bed at the time was Chowdhury Sisan, who was a local business owner in Eastleigh. Chowdhury owned a newsagent's. So for him, getting up at the crack of dawn, or in this instance, actually before dawn, it was a normal thing and something he was used to. Chowdhury was the type of person who was always looking forward to the future. And even though money was never a big interest for him, he worked hard to make money because he was married with one child, a 5-year-old son, and his wife was pregnant with their second child. And they really meant the world to him. So he worked hard whenever he could for their future. He was 35, and he was well known in the area for being a kind and gentle man who wouldn't hurt a fly.
Oh, he sounds like a really nice guy.
Yeah, from what I can gather, he was. And he was well liked. One of the reasons why he was well liked, Rachel, because he made sure he was a part of the community. And he would do things like hand deliver groceries at no extra cost if they were elderly or sick customers of his who couldn't get to his shop.
Do you know what? I like pre-COVID, you never heard of that, did you? It's only really like during the lockdowns that people really started kind of thinking about their community again, wasn't it? So how amazing that this is back in 2014 and this man is doing everything he can to help the vulnerable in his community. What a guy.
Yeah, exactly. And his respect for family and the community probably stemmed, or at least it was helped by the fact that he was from a big family, with his parents having 4 sons and 2 daughters in total. And he was close to all of his siblings. And he also, just to show you how much he went above and beyond for his community, he was even looking after an elderly neighbour, performing tasks and other things for her, just to help her, because she was getting old and couldn't do as much things for herself. So getting back to the morning in question, Chowdhury had just left his wife and child asleep in their flat, and his flat was above his shop. So as he went downstairs and outside of his shop, he was walking towards his car. We assumed to get something, but we don't know. And as he was walking towards his car, 2 men approached him, standing either side of him, and one of the men put their arm around Chowdhury, and then both of them started talking to him. We don't know what was said, but CCTV did capture this, so we know it happened. Now, it was obvious that Chowdhury did not want to talk to the two, but they persisted, and eventually it turned violent, with them punching and kicking him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, as Chowdhury dropped to the floor, one of the men grabbed his head and put him in a headlock, while the other man rained punches and kicks actually down on his head.
Oh my goodness. And what? This is still very early on in the morning, right?
Yeah, this is about 4:30 in the morning.
Oh my God.
On a Sunday morning. Yeah, the 2 men then proceeded to throw Chowdhury about, almost akin to a ragdoll, slamming his head, and he was actually unconscious by now, slamming his head several times into parked cars before eventually stealing his wallet, which contained cash and cards, his mobile phone, and his cigarettes, and they just left him unconscious in a crumpled heap on the floor. Such was the brutalness of the attack. Several members of the public, but thankfully not Chowdhury's wife or son, because she didn't want to hear this, woke up from their sleep, and multiple 999 calls were made to the emergency services while the attack was actually still happening. So there's 999 calls all out there, and I've heard some of them were actually describing what's happening to the emergency services as it's happening. The witnesses described how the attack lasted for around 6 minutes. And they described how at the start, Chowdhury was just laying on the floor, crying out in pain, asking for them to stop, while the pair of men repeatedly kicked him in the head. And you got to remember, he was just yards from his home because his flat was above his shop.
Yeah.
So the police and an ambulance, they rushed to the scene, but by the time the police had arrived, the perpetrators had fled, and all they found was Chowdhury unconscious on the floor. Now, the paramedics, they worked tirelessly to try to save his life, with him being rushed to the hospital in critical condition. And even though Chowdhury made it to the hospital alive, such were the severity of his injuries, he died as a result of severe brain injuries.
Oh, God.
The 2 men who attacked and killed Chowdhury did so purely with the initial intentions to rob him, but that became a secondary priority quite quickly, and they simply attacked him because they could.
You're joking me.
No.
I thought you were going to ask me like why I thought they attacked him, and I was going to say that a case of potentially like mistaken identity, like somebody might have had a vendetta against him, or you quite often hear of like businessmen, like small businessmen, taking out like loans, don't you, that are quite like usually high interest rates because they're like from dodgy people, and that he might have like not necessarily made payments or something, but they literally jumped on him at 4:30 in the morning to rob him. That
Initially, yes.
that is appalling. Like I don't understand. Like, had they planned? I mean, you're going to go into this. I won't carry on asking questions. I'm sorry.
No, ask a question. It's interesting you say that because what you said, I initially thought maybe it was like mistaken identity or they owed money and stuff like that. It's interesting as to what comes out in the court case.
Oh,
So we'll
okay.
put a pin in that, but no, in all honesty, it looked like they killed him. But they attacked him because they wanted to rob him, but that soon turned into just an attack because they could.
Jeez. It sounds like they staked him out though, and obviously we're familiar with his routine. So they must have been like watching him for a couple of days or weeks as well.
Um,
Unless it was
oh,
opportunistic and you tell me they were just walking past and
well, I tell you what, let's get into it, and
okay.
I'll find out. So the names of the two men were Jonathan and Samuel McKinley, and they were 23 and 25 respectively. They were brothers, by the way, if you hadn't guessed.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess.
they were both local men, with Jonathan coming from the local area of Chandler's Ford, and his brother was technically homeless, but it was a situation where he had no official fixed abode, but was living somewhere. He wasn't homeless. And a lot of the times in this situation, it's more to do with benefit payments. So the person that they're living with can still claim as a single person. They're
Oh,
not technically homeless. So the brothers, they'd gone out the night before because it was Saturday night. So they'd gone out drinking. They started their night at various friends' houses, drinking heavily before moving on to the Lytton Tree pub in Eastleigh, which is near the train station. It was obvious to the customers in the pub that the pair were spoiling for a fight. And Jonathan was actually barred from the pub and all the other local pubs as he was on a pub watch scheme. But because he looked so alike to his brother, they got confused, the staff at the pub that is, about which one was actually barred, so they just let both of them stay.
oh, fabulous. Yeah, you can both stay and drink instead of both being ejected from the premises. That makes perfect sense.
I know it's odd, isn't it?
Yep.
Now, I said it was obvious to the customers in the pub that they were spoiling for a fight because they were. Because they were trying to provoke them. The brothers were trying to provoke the other customers in the pub. They were threatening them and making them uncomfortable, so much so that one of the groups in the pub actually called the police on the pair that night. When the police arrived, they opted not to arrest the pair, but to try to defuse the situation, which they did enough to their own satisfaction. So they left the pub and everything calmed down.
Wow. It's not going to sit well with the police that they had them essentially in their hands earlier that night and then they went on to commit the crime they went on to commit.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I wish you could see my script, but no, it's not. Once they left the pub when it was closed, by now they were completely drunk, if you hadn't guessed. They made their way to another of their friend's house, and between them, they drank a litre of vodka. Once that was finished, they went out in search of more alcohol. By now, it was after 3 a.m. By 4 a.m., they found themselves in the centre of Eastleigh again, and they were still worrying the few people that were still out and about. Again, so much so that a member of the public called the police about the pair. And when the police arrived, they warned the pair about their hostile behaviour and let them go on their way. Now, the police spoke to them at 4:10 in the morning, and they
Oh,
left. Yes, and they left them at 4:15. So just 15 minutes before they came across Chowdhury.
Jesus. And you think if they were that tanked that, as you say, they were on a mission to kill him, that the police would have picked up on the state of mind and their behavior, being that couldn't be controlled. You'd have hoped so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you'd hope so, yeah. But yeah,
Unless, of
no,
course, they were able to mask those um what not symptoms, but unless of course they were able to mask their true colors for that brief 5 minutes and yes, officer, we're going to go home, officer, sorry, officer, and
yeah, I mean, you don't know, but yeah, it's worrying. Now,
yeah.
I'm not going to go into what happened with Chowdhury again because I already have. But once they left him on the floor, they went on to one of their friends' houses and Andrea Palmer, where they put their now bloodstained clothes and trainers in her washing machine and put them on a 2-hour cycle at 90 degrees. It
Oh
was
wow.
what they put in. They didn't put all their clothes in. They put in a pair of jeans, one top, and a pair of trainers.
Wow.
Now, Andrea didn't actually know they were in her house because she was asleep. And she actually woke to find them outside of her bedroom door.
Oh my god.
So I'm not sure if they had clothes at her house or they got them elsewhere, but they were both fully dressed, and they both had trainers on, even though they put them put some in the wash. So maybe they got some from here. I don't know. We don't know where they got them from. But obviously, when she found them, she kicked them out of her house because it was by now like 5 a.m. or something similar to that. And then when she went downstairs to check they hadn't damaged or stolen anything, I mean, imagine not having friends like that where you have to check they haven't stolen anything.
Yeah.
It was then that she found the washing machine was on. Now, at around 9 a.m. that Sunday morning, so around 4.5 hours after the attack, the pair chatted rather bizarrely to a couple walking their baby in the park. Now, I say bizarrely because they spoke mainly about Mother's Day and breastfeeding with the couple. Now, it was a very one-sided conversation with the couple being polite to try and get rid of these pair of drunken men as quickly as possible. How scary was that? You're taking your baby for a walk in the morning, like your very young baby, and suddenly a pair of drunken men come up to you and start talking about breastfeeding and Mother's Day and whatnot.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine that woman was in like blind panic about like her escape route and what to do.
Yeah,
And the thing is as well, like it's normal behavior, like in the early hours of the morning or late at night, to take your baby for a walk, to desperately get them off to sleep. Like you then don't want to be like cornered. I'm not saying they were intimidating, but you just don't want anyone talking to you, let alone two drunks, and about
yeah.
quite personal things as well.
And when you've got a newborn baby, I'm assuming here, so tell me if I'm wrong, Rachel, but you'd feel more vulnerable anyway. So even if they weren't outwards being aggressive, you'd feel threatened because you could tell they were drunk and you've got your baby with you. It's a natural, like, parental instinct, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So a few hours later, they were arrested outside of Samuel's girlfriend's flat on Monk's Way in Eastleigh. Now, I was going to put the clip of them getting arrested in between for us to listen to, but to be honest, listeners, it's really bad audio, and no one really wants to hear that and it hurting your eardrums. But if you really want to, it's on YouTube. But between them, when arrested, they showed shock and surprise at being arrested for murder. They repeatedly called the police stupid because they wouldn't kill anyone. And they also kept asking if they could explain themselves. It's weird how they kept saying they wouldn't kill anyone, but also wanted to explain themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. They just I was just about to say what a pair of idiots, but they definitely deserve a more vile name because they've killed a man. Like, and would they have recognized in their drunken state at this stage that he'd have died?
Well, they first thing they did was go to a friend's house to wash the bloodstained clothes.
Yeah, but
So they was aware enough to do that, to know that they had to give
yeah.
it evidence.
Okay, yeah.
But maybe not if he died. Or, he wasn't dead by then, was he?
I know he wasn't dead,
Yeah.
but would they have realized that their beating could have left him dead?
I don't know. It's subjective, isn't it? Opinion,
Yeah.
but you'd think yes. From what I can gather, yes.
Okay.
But who knows? So they would both be charged with murder, no option of manslaughter. So the prosecution weren't even giving that out in case they were found not guilty, just murder, and they would both plead not guilty to murder. During the trial, Samuel didn't give evidence, but his brother did. He would say, and this goes on to what you were saying earlier, he would say that he had no intention of killing Chowdhury and that it was just a robbery gone wrong. Now, he also contradicts himself here, but we'll go into that in a moment. Now, evidence in the trial would be quite damning, though. Firstly, you had the blood-stained clothes that the police recovered from their friend's washing machine, and she had left them there when she saw them in there and contacted the police straight away. Well, not straight away, but as soon as she saw that they'd been arrested, she contacted the police and said, hey, these clothes are in my washing machine.
Good on her. Good on her.
Now, the blood on the clothes matched Chowdhury's blood. Secondly, there was the CCTV, which saw them approaching Chowdhury, and another camera, which is a little bit further out, caught portions of the attack, including them slamming his head against cars and kicking him when he was down. So if it's a robbery gone bad, why did they carry on attacking him after he was unconscious?
Yeah, exactly.
The post-mortem would show that Chowdhury was likely unconscious after 1 or 2 minutes. So roughly 4 to 5 minutes of the attack was just a savage attack, because he can't have been resistant if he wasn't even moving for no other reason than they wanted to.
Oh, that's just that. Doesn't that evidence the violence and hate in them?
Yes. Jonathan's fingerprint would also be found on a car at the scene of the attack. It was actually a fingerprint in Chowdhury's blood. Additionally, when Jonathan was arrested, he had a damaged foot and hand. He claimed this was caused by the police when he was arrested, but the body cam footage showed that it was a peaceful arrest with no resistance. The prosecution claimed he injured them punching and kicking Chowdhury. Now, for a lot of the questions when he was cross-examined on the witness stand about details of the attack, he said he didn't remember because he was too drunk. Jonathan would go on to say in witness testimony, this is where he contradicted himself, that they approached Chowdhury because they thought he was a sex pest who had been bothering his sister the previous evening in the pub, something he said he now knew was wrong as it wasn't Chowdhury. So he said that it was a robbery gone wrong, but he also said that they approached him because they thought he was a sex pest that bothered his sister. So he actually contradicted himself. He was asked why he went no comment in the police interviews if that was the case, that he thought Chowdhury was a sex pest, to which he replied, and this is his quote here, I normally go no comment when arrested. At that time, I had severe memory gaps of what happened. I didn't want to incriminate myself by saying stuff in an interview that could later turn out to be a lie. I didn't want to shoot myself in the foot.
Wow.
So unsurprisingly, Rachel, I don't think it's a shock. The pair would be found guilty quite quickly by the jury. In her sentencing remarks, the judge would reveal that between them, the pair had over 66 different convictions, with Jonathan having previous for unprovoked violent attacks and Samuel for robbery at knife point. So they both got previous for violent crimes in the past. And Jonathan for unprovoked violent attacks. Does that sound familiar, Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes more sense that because obviously I'd been asking you if it was if they had been scoping out this guy and like whether they'd been staking out and checking out his routine, but no, absolutely not. It was an opportunistic moment for them to play into their normal behavior to cause havoc on this poor man's like life on a so early on a Sunday morning.
It's interesting though that you thought, or maybe it was a case of mistaken identity, and obviously Jonathan thought that was a good defense by saying that. I mean, it's basically not true, but you can think, oh well, maybe like in some twisted way, you could go, maybe it was justified attacking him because he thought he was somebody else. I know that's not a justification.
Not that it makes it any better,
yeah.
but yeah, it's. I guess a judge would take that into consideration when sentencing versus a purely innocent person crossing the road and these two men taking an opportunity to beat the living daylights out of him.
Yes, indeed. The judge went on to say that the attack was just savage and it was blatantly obvious that they enjoyed it. And even though they said they couldn't remember most of it because they were drunk, they still had the foresight to go to try and wash their clothes to get rid of evidence. The pair would go on to be sentenced to life with a minimum term of, can you guess how long they got here?
I'm hoping because of its brutality and randomness that it's a lengthy sentence. So maybe like 15 or 16 years each minimum.
They both got a minimum term of 28 years each.
Oh wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And like just to like, a man has lost his life here, and nothing can bring him back or bring the family any comfort in the loss, but you will sleep better at night knowing that these two awful human beings are behind bars for, the best part of their heydays, hey?
Yes. After the trial and in victim impact statements, Chowdhury's wife would go on to say that she struggles to cope without him, that she now has two young children to look after who will grow up without a father, and his daughter, because she ended up giving birth to a girl, was born without ever seeing him or without ever her seeing her dad.
Gosh, and you do wonder, you can't help but wonder what's on their minds in those last moments, that they're thinking, got it. And I would imagine with such a kind and caring man, he's just hoping that they're not going to enter the flat and carry out that brutality on his family. That was probably his biggest fear, wasn't
it? Yeah, definitely, yeah. And because you don't know what he was thinking. He might have been thinking, well, this might be a racist attack, so they go after my family,
yeah.
It might be the racist. We don't know. It could have been. They could have seen, well, look, there's an Asian man there. I don't know. I'm not saying it was, but who knows what went through their minds. Other family members would go on to say that he was well loved and how much he was missed, and they hoped the pair would never get out. But they felt that 28 years minimum was the second best thing. The local community would show its affection for Chowdhury by laying flowers at his door of the shop with heartfelt messages in them. That goes to show, because it wasn't just a person who owned the shop. They obviously cared about him, didn't they?
Yeah, no, obviously.
2 days. He doesn't finish there, though. Rachel, you're going to find this mind-boggling. 2 days after they were sentenced, news reports would be released that a convicted killer would escape from a Belfast prison. That convicted killer was Samuel McKinley. But Rachel, it wasn't the Samuel McKinley that I've just been talking about. It was the brother's father. Samuel McKinley Sr. had killed a man back in 1996. It was a friend of his.
Oh my God.
Yeah, when they'd gotten into a fight and he'd stabbed him to death. And he'd been in prison ever since. He was caught. Yeah, he was caught a few weeks later. But can you believe it? At the time, it was his 5th prison escape.
How on earth was he not in a room with like 5 walls protecting him?
It was day releases. No, when they get towards the end of the sentences, they go up for like release to work in a day and stuff like that every time.
And they let him out 5 times before they realised he was not.
Well, as of 2021, that's the last report I could find, they'd actually added another one. So we'd had 6 prison escapes.
Oh my God.
I said I wanted to add that in. I know it's not linked to the two brothers or the murder of Chowdhury, but for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think our listeners, and I thought you and your reaction proved it, would find it amazing someone can go on the run 6 times and escape 6 times. Albeit he got caught very quickly after each time, but he's a convicted killer. Surely, like the day releases and the work releases are to get someone prepared to go out into the community. If they can't be trusted and they've escaped it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, at what point do they go, maybe this person needs to spend more time behind bars so they can obviously develop themselves, so they're not going to escape as soon as we let them out. Because why would you, when it's blatantly the first step in a long process to get released from prison anyway?
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling. But the second reason why I wanted to put that in there, because I think it raises an interesting question about his two sons. Were their lives influenced by their father and his crimes? So did it make them want to become a criminal? Or the opposite? Did they become criminals because their lives had been ruined by their father going to prison for murder? Or is it just a pure coincidence? And can there be any link between the two? What do you think?
I think it's a real cop-out to say that their father ruined their lives. So, they ran into a life of crime. How often do you hear and see of men and women as children of awful, serial killers, criminals, and others that go on and use their experiences for the better? No, I just think that these two men had evil inside them.
Obviously, I disagree fully with you there. So, and what about the case then, Rachel? What do you think about the actual case?
Oh, it's just heartbreaking case, as always. A senseless death. These pair were out looking for trouble, basically. And that's evidenced by several members of the public calling the police in the run up to the event, and the police coming out to speak to them about their disorderly behavior twice that night. And their plan could have so easily been disrupted by being held in a cell. But I'm not blaming the police, because what do? Do you take everyone that's drunk and disorderly, and bang them up overnight? Then they're going to have a problem, aren't they? So, just a heartbreaking case. I really feel for the wife and the children and everyone that's been left without such a fine man and pillar of the community in their lives.
Yeah. I think you've said that perfectly. Should I wrap this up then, Rachel?
Yes, yeah.
So this has been season 3, episode 13, called Like Father, Like Sons. And if it's safe for you to do so, I encourage you to relax. Close your eyes and picture the scene. Now, we often talk about the good and the bad qualities of the police on this show. Should there be better procedures in place that could identify that when the police spoke to Jonathan and Samuel just 15 minutes before the attack, that it would flag that they were both violent criminals, that they'd already been spoken to earlier about threatening behaviour, and combined with their obvious drunken state, would it then make the police do something different? And if they had, maybe Chowdhury would still be alive and enjoying his family as he should be. We're taking a mid-season break next week.
So we'll be back the week after next with more true crime. So looking forward to catching up with you all soon.
So thank you everyone for listening, and we shall see you next week.
Yes, thanks for tuning in, guys, and chat to you next week.